The ocean was quiet. Too quiet. Beneath the vast blue surface of the Pacific Ocean, something moved unseen, silent, patient, deadly. A hunter waiting. Above, the sky roared with power. Engines thundered. Aircraft sliced through the clouds. The pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy stretched across the horizon, massive, confident, unstoppable. At the center of it all was the carrier Shokaku, a veteran of war, a survivor of battles, a symbol of dominance. Its decks were alive. Planes lined wing to wing. Fuel hoses snaked across metal surfaces. Crew members rushed with urgency, but not fear. They believed they were in control. They had no idea. Because far below, hidden in darkness, an American submarine was closing in. Inside the steel hull of the USS Cavalla, the air was thick with tension. No one spoke loudly. Every movement was deliberate. Every sound mattered. The captain stood still, listening, thinking, waiting. Through the periscope, the unimaginable came into view. A fleet. Not just ships, but an entire force of war. And there it was, Shokaku. Massive. Exposed. Unaware. This wasn't just a target. This was an opportunity. One that might never come again. But it was also a risk. A deadly one. Because one mistake, one wrong move, would mean instant destruction. The submarine adjusted its course carefully, slowly. The crew felt it. That silent shift, that moment when everything changes. Above, aircraft roared off the deck of Shokaku. Missions were underway. Attacks were being launched. The war was moving forward. But below, time was running out. The captain gave the order. Prepare to fire. Torpedoes were readied. Each one precise. Each one carrying the weight of the moment. Distance closed. Angles calculated. Hearts pounded. Closer. Closer. Then, fire. The torpedoes surged forward, cutting through the dark water like invisible knives. Fast. Silent. Unstoppable. Seconds passed, but they felt like minutes. Inside the submarine, no one breathed. Then impact. The first explosion tore into Shokaku's side, a violent shock that ripped through steel. The ship trembled. Then another hit. And another. Fire erupted instantly. Smoke burst upward. The calm was gone. On the deck, confusion exploded. Men shouted. Sirens screamed. The impossible had just happened. A submarine attack they hadn't seen coming. Below deck, the damage spread quickly. Fuel lines ruptured. Vapors filled the air. Heat intensified. For a moment, it looked survivable. The crew rushed to respond. Damage control teams moved fast. They had done this before. They knew the drill: contain the fire, seal the compartments, stabilize the ship. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The fires weren't behaving normally. They were growing, feeding, spreading faster than expected. And then it happened. A massive internal explosion. It tore through the carrier from within, a deep, violent blast that shook the entire ship. Flames erupted across the deck. Aircraft ignited instantly. Fuel turned into firestorms. Panic spread, real panic. Because now it was clear. This wasn't just damage. This was the beginning of the end. Back inside the submarine, the crew waited, listening. They could hear it, distant explosions echoing through the water. The captain didn't celebrate. Not yet. He knew better. Because above, the Japanese fleet was now alert. Searching. Hunting. Destroyers moved quickly, scanning the ocean, dropping depth charges. The hunter had become the hunted. Inside the submarine, tension returned, sharp, immediate. Engines slowed. Silence deepened. Then, the first depth charge exploded. A violent shockwave slammed into the hull. Lights flickered. Metal groaned. Another explosion, closer. And another. The crew held on, waiting, hoping. Every second felt like the last. But the submarine held. Barely. Above, Shokaku burned. The fires were out of control now. Nothing could stop them. The deck was an inferno. Smoke filled the sky. Explosions continued, without pause. The once mighty carrier was dying, and everyone on board knew it. Orders were shouted. Evacuations began. Men jumped into the ocean, some injured, some terrified, some already knowing they wouldn't survive. The ship listed slowly at first, then more. Water rushed in while fire still raged. A terrible combination. The final moments approached. From a distance, other ships watched helplessly, silently. Nothing could be done. The carrier that once dominated the sea was now being consumed by it. Then the final explosion. A massive blast that shook everything. And after that, there was nothing left to save. Shokaku began to sink, slowly, heavily. The ocean opened beneath it, and piece by piece, it disappeared.
Gone.
Back in the submarine, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. But the danger wasn't over. Because the enemy was still searching, still angry, still close. The captain made a decision. Stay deep, stay silent. They had struck a devastating blow, but survival was not guaranteed. Above, the Japanese fleet regrouped. Shock turned into rage. Loss turned into determination. They would not forget this. They would not forgive it. And somewhere in that vast ocean, they were still searching for the submarine, for the men responsible, for revenge. Below, in the darkness, the submarine drifted quietly. Invisible, untouchable, for now. Because what happened next would push both sides even further. The attack had changed everything. But it had also triggered something deeper, more dangerous. And the story of what followed was far from over. The ocean above was restless now. Not calm, not silent. Alive with anger. Destroyers carved through the water at full speed, their engines roaring, their crews on edge. They circled like predators, scanning every inch of the surface, every shadow beneath it. They knew the submarine was still there, somewhere, watching, waiting. Below, inside the USS Cavalla, the air felt heavier than before. Sweat clung to skin. Hands gripped metal. No one moved unless necessary. The captain remained still, listening. Every sound mattered now. Every vibration. Every distant echo. Then another explosion. A depth charge detonated above them. The hull shuddered violently. Pipes rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. For a moment, it felt like the ocean itself was trying to crush them. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The message was clear. They had been found. Above, the Japanese destroyers tightened their search pattern. Sonar pulses cut through the water, probing, hunting, listening for the faintest sign of life. The submarine slowed even further. Silence became survival. Inside, the crew waited, breathing quietly, thinking of home, of survival, of what would happen if the next explosion came just a little closer. Because one direct hit would end everything. Another depth charge closer. The shockwave slammed into the hull again. Lights flickered. A gauge needle trembled dangerously. But still, the submarine held. Time stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Then slowly, the explosions began to move away. Above, the destroyers shifted their search, uncertain, frustrated. The submarine had slipped through, but not by much. Back on the surface, the scene around the sinking Shokaku was beyond anything words could capture. Flames still raged across the wreckage. Thick smoke climbed into the sky, visible for miles. The sea itself burned in places where fuel had spread across the surface. Survivors struggled in the water, clinging to debris, calling out, some silent, too exhausted to move. Ships moved in to rescue them, but even that was dangerous. Explosions still erupted from within the dying carrier. Every moment near it carried risk. On the decks of nearby ships, officers watched in disbelief. Shokaku was not just another carrier. It was a symbol, a veteran, a survivor of earlier battles. And now it was gone. The realization spread slowly, then all at once. If Shokaku could be destroyed, what else was vulnerable? Confidence began to crack. Below the surface, the submarine crew could not see any of this. But they could feel it. The silence above had changed. The intensity had shifted. The captain finally spoke, quietly, controlled. Maintain course. They would not rise yet, not while danger still lingered. But deep down, every man aboard knew what they had done. They had struck a blow that would echo across the war. Hours passed. The ocean gradually returned to a deceptive calm. The destroyers widened their search, then pulled back. The immediate danger began to fade. Only then did the submarine begin to rise, slowly, carefully. The periscope broke the surface. The captain looked. What he saw was not victory, not celebration. It was destruction. Smoke still hung in the air. Debris floated across the water. The horizon felt empty in a way it hadn't before. Shokaku was gone. Not damaged. Not retreating.
Gone.
For a moment, the captain said nothing. Then he lowered the periscope. No words were needed. The crew understood.
They had changed something.
Far away, news of the sinking began to spread through the Japanese fleet. At first disbelief, then shock, then silence. Reports were confirmed. Details verified. A carrier lost to a submarine. It was more than a tactical loss. It was psychological. Because submarines were supposed to be threats, not executioners of giants. And yet, that is exactly what had happened. The balance of power shifted, even if only slightly. But in war, even small shifts mattered. Back inside the submarine, the crew finally allowed themselves to relax. Not completely, but enough to breathe.
Some sat down.
Some closed their eyes. Some simply stared ahead, processing what had just unfolded. They had faced death.
Come close to it.
Felt it press against them in the darkness. And they had survived. But survival was only part of the story. They had succeeded. And that success carried weight. Because they knew the enemy would not forget. The ocean would not forget. And the war was far from over. Days later, the full scale of the event became clear. The sinking of Shokaku was not just another loss. It was a turning moment, a reminder that even the most powerful ships could fall, that even the strongest fleets had weaknesses. And that sometimes the greatest threats came from where you least expected, deep below, hidden, silent, waiting. For the right moment.
For the perfect strike.
The story of that day would be told in different ways, from different perspectives. But one truth remained constant. A single submarine. A calculated risk. A moment of precision.
And a giant brought down.
Not by overwhelming force, but by timing, skill, and silence. The men of the USS Cavalla would carry that memory with them through the rest of the war and into the years that followed. Because they had witnessed something rare, something powerful, the moment when everything aligned. The moment when the hunter struck perfectly. And the moment when the sea itself seemed to pause as history changed beneath its surface. And in that vast, endless ocean, the echoes of that attack would remain, unseen, unheard, but never forgotten.